Okay, and this is going to be the last section for chapter 8, and it's called Errors and Correct Decisions. When you are doing research, you have three possibilities: making a type 1 error, making a type 2 error, or making a correct decision. What is a type 1 error? A type 1 error occurs if you reject the null hypothesis, but in reality, the null is true. Basically, you are rejecting the truth. A type 2 error occurs if you do not reject the null hypothesis. And if you don't reject the null hypothesis, that means you are accepting it. But the null hypothesis is false. Basically, you are not rejecting false information. In layman's terms, you are accepting something that is false. And a correct decision comes from when you're rejecting false information or you are accepting true information. So, here is the diagram that lets us know if it's a type 1 error, a type 2 error, and a correct decision. If you are rejecting the null hypothesis, but the null is true, because you rejected true information, that is a type 1 error. If you are rejecting the null hypothesis, and in reality, the null is false, because you rejected something that is false, that is a correct decision. Now, if you do not reject the null hypothesis, and the null is true, that is also a correct decision because you are not rejecting something that is true. And if you are not rejecting something that is true, that means you are accepting something that is true. And the last one is if you do not reject the null, but the null is false. You are not rejecting false information. That is a type 2 error. That means you are accepting false information. So let's do 3 questions and see if we can identify if it's a type 1 error, a type 2 error, or correct decision. Number 13. Determine whether the outcome is a type 1 error, a type 2 error, or correct decision. A test is made up of the null hypothesis, mu equals 28, versus the alternative hypothesis, mu does not equal to 28. The true value of mu is 29, and the null is not rejected. Okay, let's look here. It says first, the null is not rejected. So my null hypothesis, I hate when I do this. My null hypothesis, if I do not reject my null, I am accepting my null. Let's go here. We did not reject the null. So that means it can either be a correct decision or it can be a type 2 error. Now, the null hypothesis states that mu equals 28. However, the true value, which means in reality, mu is equal to 29. Now, here's the problem. The null hypothesis states that mu equals to 28, but in reality, mu is 29. So that means the null hypothesis, this is false. Mu equal to 28, that is a false statement. That is a false claim because the actual value of mu is 29. So the null is false. Therefore, we made a type 2 error. Now, B says, determine if the outcome is a type 1 error, a type 2 error, or correct decision. A test is made up of the null hypothesis, mu is equal to 28, versus the alternative hypothesis, mu is less than 28. The true value of mu is 28 and the null is not rejected. So in this case, the null is not rejected. So if I do not reject my null, I am accepting the null. So the null is saying mu is equal to 28. So let's go back up here. Once again, let's clear this. We did not reject the null. Let's look at what's in reality. The true value of mu is 28. So that means in reality, mu is equal to 28, which means that the null is true. That is a true statement. Therefore, we made a correct decision. We did not reject the null, and the null says mu equals 28. We took it, and in reality, mu does equal to 28. That is a correct decision. Let's do letter C. Same thing. Determine if it's a type 1 error, a type 2 error, or a correct decision. A test is made up of the null hypothesis, mu equals 28, versus the alternative hypothesis, mu is less than 28. The true value of mu is 28 and the null is rejected. So if you see here, my null is rejected. Because I rejected my null, I am taking the alternative. I am taking the fact that mu is less than 28. So let's go back up here. Let's clear it. Put that in red. We rejected the null. So it is either a type 1 error or a correct decision. Now, in reality, the true value of mu is 28. Wait a minute, look here. If in reality mu is 28, and if you notice right here, mu is 28, that means that the null was true. We rejected something that is true. Therefore, this is a type 1 error. Once again, we rejected something that was true. This is a type 1 error. We rejected the fact that mu was 28. In reality, mu was 28. Type 1 error. And that is it, guys, when it comes to classifying as a type 1 error, a type 2 error, or correct decision. Hopefully you understood that, and I'll see you around. Take care.